Welcome, one and all, to episode 43 of the NFL Draft Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co-host, Justin Higdon. And we're here tonight to preview the Group of Five and the Independents for their NFL prospects this year. And it's a really fun group this year, isn't it, Justin?
It's a fun group. We have, I think, about 9 guys that we're going to run through tonight. And so we're not going to go as in-depth as we have done on the other conference previews because we've got some other stuff planned for tonight as well. So anybody that's still interested in obtaining a free 2017 NFL Draft prospect preview for subscribing to the podcast, check out my pinned tweet. The instructions are still there. My plan here from here on out is to just continue to give this thing away for anybody who subscribes up to the opening weekend of the season. So let's say up until next Thursday night, because then I'll be out of town next weekend and I won't be able to get back to people on their emails.
And it's a great reference, and it'll be perfect for a time like this where you go over, the Group of Five, where, maybe outside of Notre Dame, not as well known players. And we're going to start today with the Notre Dame players, of course. And that's not a bad thing, but, we're going to start with Notre Dame. And the question is, in our good buddy, Derek Clausen, who writes for Bleacher Report and a couple other sites, wrote about DeShone Kizer, the quarterback. He's only going to be a redshirt junior, right? So, he could technically go back one more year, right?
He's actually a redshirt sophomore. So he has 2 years of eligibility left if he so chooses.
And Kizer is going to split time to start the year with Malik Zaire at quarterback. This is the basis of this argument and what every NFL draft person will, acknowledge. Kizer is the better prospect, but it's not exactly a ringing endorsement when he's not necessarily the better quarterback at Notre Dame for the offense that they run, right?
I don't know.
This is kind of like the Ohio State thing last year, right?
Kind of, but you can I choose to interpret Brian Kelly the way I choose to, which is to say both quarterbacks. He said both quarterbacks will play against Texas. Maybe he's super confident that they're just going to blow Texas out of the stadium, and that Kizer is going to be on the bench cooling his heels while Malik Zaire mops up. But I don't, I'm joking because I don't really think that's what he meant. I do think he kind of meant a 2-quarterback system, and the old saying is if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. And I think Ohio State, as good as their 2 quarterbacks have been for them, last year you kind of saw that, where you just have guys, even if they're very good players, they're looking over each other's shoulders, and they're not as effective as they could be until one or the other knows that he doesn't have to look over the shoulder at the other guy. So I think that Kelly's running the risk, unless he really was kind of joking about this. But in my opinion, I think you should go with Kizer here, because not only is he the better pro prospect from an arm and size standpoint, although Zaire's arm is he's got a pretty good arm himself. But Zaire's only got the 3 starts in his college career, and DeShone Kizer had 11 last year, and including some big games as a redshirt freshman. So he was 19 years old, playing some big games. He gained some experience, and in the meantime, Zaire is a player who really only has that one big start, and that was in that bowl game when he took over from Everett Golson. So you have a team now and a coach that has kind of been jerking his quarterbacks around now for 3 years.
Yeah, and the quarterback carousel at Notre Dame hasn't exactly worked out in the pros, albeit that was more under Charlie Weiss than under Brian Kelly. But, they haven't even been able really to hold quarterbacks there either. I just don't know, because like you said, Zaire is a nice player. I think he's a good player, but he's just not he's not going to have the other aspects of the game that the NFL will want in a quarterback, correct?
Yeah, Kaiser's just such a big guy, 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds, and he's the dual threat kind of player. He's not a great runner, but he's more athletic runner. He's a better runner than, say, a Cardale Jones, who was a similar size. And as a freshman last year, Kaiser had a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, had 31 total touchdowns when you count his passing touchdowns plus rushing touchdowns. Passed for almost 3,000 yards, rushed for over 500. This guy, to me, those are the type of performances that earn you a starting job going forward. And I know people don't like guys to lose their job because of injury, but in this case, it's not that Zaire lost the job; it's that Kaiser won it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. Here's the last question you kind of have. How long will Kaiser want to put up with this type of, if say it goes on for a long time or he's beat out, that he's in kind of a no-win situation unless he wins the position outright and it gets all the snaps, right?
Yeah, you wonder about that because I think Zaire has another year of eligibility left after this one, and he doesn't strike me as the type of prospect that would declare early. And then you have Kaiser, who has 2 years of eligibility, but if he transferred, he would have to sit out a year unless he transferred down. So it's kind of, yeah, you've got two guys that are kind of in limbo because if Kaiser had been named the starter sooner, maybe Zaire could have decided to transfer. So I know, guys, you know, transferring is not always the solution that we make it out to be on this show and on Twitter when we talk about draft prospects. But if guys want to get playing time, it's an option for them. And if they're kind of held, I don't want to say held hostage, but they're kind of held at bay by saying, hey, guys, you're both going to play. It's cool. Then it benefits. It doesn't benefit the players as much as it benefits the coaches and the coaching staff. Here, Brian Kelly sets himself up with two quarterbacks that have some starting experience in case something happens to the other. But in the meantime, one of those guys is going to be sitting on the bench at some point and frustrated that he's not playing.
Yeah, and you assume that's going to happen eventually. So you just hope that it works itself out, whoever it's best for, no matter who it's best for, right?
Right. I mean, it did happen at Ohio State last year amid a season that they didn't live up to the expectations that people had for them going into the year. And ultimately, Jones looked like a player who was feeling the pressure, and Barrett looked like a player who was chomping at the bit to get into games. Both of those guys looked annoyed at the situation.
Moving on, but staying at the quarterback position, Greg Ward out of Houston is turning a lot of heads. He is a dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands. It's basically, a mix of Johnny Manziel and Vernon Adams in a player. But is he really an NFL prospect at quarterback, or is he going to have to switch positions, the dreaded position switch? And the reason we say this is simple. He's listed at 5'11". He ran for more touchdowns than he threw last year. Is his position of the future really quarterback, or is he just such a dynamic athlete right now that he's win at the college level?
So before we get too many people telling us that height doesn't matter for quarterbacks, so even if he's maybe a shade under 5'11", we might have some truthers out there that think he can do it. But the thing is, more importantly to me, is that he's listed at 185, and that people have told me that he's really more like 170, 175. So they're talking about like a Rakeem Cato type of skinny player. And obviously Ward is a dynamic runner, and he was among the FBS leaders in rushing touchdowns last year. He had 21 rushing touchdowns and over 1,100 yards. I kept watching Houston. I found them intensely entertaining last year with Tom Herman in his first year as the head coach there. And he was running what I thought was like an Ohio State light offense where Kenneth Farrow, their running back, who's now with San Diego, was playing the role of Carlos Hyde in Herman's first year as OC at Ohio State. And then you had Greg Ward playing the role of Braxton Miller. And obviously those guys weren't the type of prospects that the Ohio State guys were, but you saw the same types of things out of that offense. It was very fun to watch, and I think it's going to be a big producing offense again this year, and Ward is going to have a really good year as long as he stays in one piece. But I don't think he's a pro quarterback prospect. I've talked to other people who would normally contest that he is a quarterback prospect. Even people who are usually on the side of keeping quarterbacks at quarterback tend to think that Ward is a future wide receiver. And to Ward's benefit here, he actually has some experience playing receiver. So it wouldn't be a complete shift. He wouldn't be learning something from scratch.
And it's going to, I mean, we think he's a dynamic athlete. So, we're assuming that he'll be able to make the switch. But we saw, this offseason, and I don't think he's going to test poorly like Trevon Boykin did, but we saw this offseason that sometimes, these quarterbacks aren't as athletic as we think they are.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not as fast as we think. Ward does look really fast to me.
He does, and I agree with that.
Yeah, he's playing in the AAC, so I don't know what types of athletes he's facing on defense there. But if you looked at Houston's defense, the guys that came out of there last year tested really well. And they have a cornerback this year, Brandon Wilson, who's going to test really, really well too. So there are some athletes in that conference. And I don't think Greg Ward's any type of slouch. I think he's going to run a fast enough time to make that transition to wide receiver realistic. And he does have 25 catches in his career. So, again, he's not learning it from scratch. He's also returned some punts.
And that's important, when you are an undersized quarterback, that you find a way to get involved and make plays. And then, that translates to the next level. You look at the guy, what was his name? I can't remember now. From Navy. Oh, goodness.
Keenan Reynolds last year.
Yeah, Keenan Reynolds last year. And he knew he was going to have to move and go to running back, and he made the switch. So and
got drafted.
Yeah, and it's an important thing, and maybe it is unfair, but I mean, I think in Ward's case, it's probably going to be what's best for him moving forward. Staying with the quarterbacks, Gunnar Kiel, he was the top recruit, right? Like 5 years ago.
Yeah, he was a 5-star recruit, and he committed to Indiana, and he committed to LSU before he ultimately enrolled in Notre Dame, and then he transferred from Notre Dame to Cincinnati, and he got some starting time. And now
didn't look bad.
No, people were talking about him as a potential first-round pick, I think 2 years ago when he was a redshirt sophomore, especially on the strength of a game that he had against Ohio State.
And then he was almost murdered by Louisville, right? Wasn't it a Louisville game last year? I can't remember exactly what game.
He suffered a severe head-neck injury where some people speculated openly that he might never play again. In the meantime, I had a redshirt freshman, Hayden Moore, who took over and played pretty well. And then when it turned out Kiel was healthy, Moore still held on to the job. And then Kiel stayed home from the bowl game last year for personal reasons. We don't know what that means, but it's mysterious. And then just the other day announced the coach of Cincinnati announced that Moore was going to be the starter. So here you have Gunnar Kiel, former 5-star recruit, a guy who's been associated with like 4 or 5 different schools, a guy who's had injury and personal problems, and 24 years old or 23 years old already. He'll be 24 next July, and now he's a backup quarterback. So this raises the question, really, is this guy is he a pro prospect? Is he like a Matt Castle where a backup will get drafted late, or is he just kind of, is there too much going on with this, with the age and the injury history and the personal issues? I really don't know, and I don't know that we're going to see any more tape of Gunnar Kiel to make the assessment of whether or not he's worth drafting. The only thing we know right now is that he does have a good arm, and he is tall, and that's, all that other stuff I just mentioned.
Yeah, so he'll, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him because, like you said, he looked like a guy that could creep up, and then he don't mean it in a joking manner, but he looked like he got murdered on live TV. Like, it was just a vicious hit. And, from there it was over. And if he doesn't come back from that, that's unfortunate and honestly not that unexpected based on what, that hit that he took. But you just hope he can recover and figure out a way to, kind of get healthy and move forward here. Because it's unfortunate when a guy, loses out to an injury, and then this was a disgusting injury. It wasn't
possibly career threatening.
Yeah, it wasn't a dirty play or anything like that. It was just, it was just one of those hits that comes along every once in a while.
And to be fair, I've never heard anything about Kiel throwing a fit or having any type of attitude issue with not starting. So there is that. Again, we don't know what the reason is for him to miss the bowl game. It could have been anything. Guys have things happen in their lives, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative. But if anybody out there who's listening tonight knows why Gunnar Kiel missed the game and knows anything more about that, feel free to let us know. Tweet us at SCoxFootballFB or at AFC2NFC.
Western Kentucky. Are they going to be your team to watch this year just because they're so much fun?
Yeah, I liked watching Western Kentucky the last 2 years because they had Brandon Doughty, and he was such a prolific quarterback. Even if he wasn't a great NFL prospect, we talked about him a number of times on the show. I mentioned him as a player that I liked in the late round or undrafted free agency area to target if you weren't going to take a quarterback early, because I thought that he had a ceiling of being a professional backup, and ultimately he does get drafted in the 7th round by the Dolphins. So they still have some players coming back this year, some offensive weapons, skill players that are interesting to watch. And the first one I wanted to mention was Leon Allen, because he was a redshirt junior last year. Or, I'm sorry, he was a redshirt senior last year, I think.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, and he suffered. Doughty kind of left him out to dry. He threw him a screen pass, and he threw it high. And Leon Allen got hit in the knee and suffered what was very similar to the injury that Willis McGahee suffered way back when he was in the national championship game against Ohio State. His knee bent the wrong way, and it was clear that it was completely wrecked at that point, and he was going to miss the rest of the season. So he missed all but 2 games. He was given a medical red shirt. But two years ago in 2014, Leon Allen had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 16 touchdowns. And he was averaging over 5 yards a carry. And we've seen Western Kentucky back Bobby Rainey, who was the workhorse before Allen. He got to the pros, and he's still hanging around. He's with the Giants right now. So Allen is a player. It'll be interesting to see if he comes back, not only from injury, but comes back to retake his job.
And then finally, Taiwan Taylor, a wide receiver for them, another explosive guy. They say that he's going to run a 4.4 40 at 6 foot and 195 pounds. What do you see from Taylor?
Taylor was a player that I think came on to the point where some people thought he might declare last year. And he ends up setting school records for catches, yards, receiving touchdowns last year. He had over 1,400 yards and over 17 yards a catch and 17 touchdowns last year. To me, I was not
good, is it?
Right. I wasn't real familiar with this guy, but he has 155 catches. So this wasn't his first time on the scene. This is a guy who was hanging around. But I talk about this, and actually Seth and I and a couple other people were texting about this. Our buddies Kyle and Dink were texting about this the other day, and I find these receivers that are in the 6 foot to 6'1" range, the 190 to 200-pound range. The receivers with that type of build are kind of a dime a dozen, especially if they run between a 4.45 and a 4.6. So to set himself apart, I think that Taylor has to become he would have to time to be a 4.4 or lower guy, and I'm not sure that he has that type of speed. Admittedly, I haven't seen enough or broken down enough to know, but I'd be surprised if he tests that fast. And I think what you're looking at here is a player who's going to continue to be very prolific, but he's going to end up being drafted in the day 3 area, 5th round or later, because he is going to be, as I said, a slight build with middling speed for a receiver. And this is where we'll get back to this later, but this is where guys went this past year that were getting hyped. Guys like Michael Thomas from Southern Miss, a guy like Justin Hardy a couple years ago, Rashad Green from Florida State a couple years ago. That's the type of receiver that I'm talking about, and that's what I see with Taylor from my early looks.
Cooper Rush is an interesting quarterback prospect from Central Michigan. What are your thoughts? Is he a guy that's going to kind of creep up boards this year if, outside of Deshaun Watson,
I think it was
people
our
are
buddy,
not blowing up? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it was our buddy Jeff Risden who kind of predicted that Cooper Rush could be the riser. We always talk about the risers, and in the past it's been guys like maybe Tom Savage, who goes from afterthought to 4th round pick, or maybe Ryan Nassib, who during the season gets hyped as a 1st round pick, but ultimately goes 4th round. But these kind of guys who they don't come from football powerhouses, but they are productive and they have the size that NFL teams like. Cooper Rush, 6'3", 227. He's not going to be too old. He'll be 23 going into his rookie year. And he's obviously a very prolific passer for Central Michigan. And I think he has red hair too. So that keeps up a trend. We've got a trend of ginger quarterbacks coming into the league. So if maybe Cooper Rush continues this ginger takeover of the quarterback position at the NFL level, completed 66% of his passes last year, I will be watching Central Michigan to watch him, but admittedly, I have not seen a ton of this guy. I just saw his bowl game last year, and because I completely did not expect him to declare. I didn't take notes, but he's got some of the things that NFL teams look for, and I'm looking forward to his hype, or his his hype train, his potential hype train. Seth, you're on mute, pal. If you're playing
first time in forever.
I know if you're playing the drinking game, you've been stone sober for weeks. So get back on it, guys.
Corey Davis, maybe the one wide receiver that if you're not big into draft, you haven't heard about this guy yet. He has a chance, does he not, to be a draft pick? Not just a draft pick, but like a day 1 draft pick?
6'3", 213 pounds. I think it's going to depend on his speed as to whether he is a day 1 pick. I think there are people out here right now who are saying that he could be a day 1 pick. We'll have to see how deep this receiver class ends up being and how thin other positions are to see if we're going to have one of those years where 4 or 5 receivers go in the 1st round. I've never thought of Corey Davis as a 1st round pick myself. I know when they played Ohio State last season, it was Daniel Braverman who had the bigger game, and he ended up going in the 7th round to the Bears. Now, Davis to me is a much better professional prospect than Braverman was, because he's got a huge size advantage, and he's probably the most productive receiver career-wise from the FBS that we've seen in this draft, I think. And 90 catches last year, 235 a year before, 33 career touchdowns. So it's a big-time player. and he's gone from a 2-star recruit to 2-time All-MAC, and he just needs 403 yards to set the MAC record for career receiving yards, not just the school record, the conference record.
And the MAC has produced some nice players over the last several years, and so that's going to be really cool accomplishment for him. From there, moving to San Diego State, and you asked the question, and it's a good question to ask. Do they have the best offensive and defensive prospect in the Mountain West? Donald Pumphrey is a running back from San Diego State. He is, it's gonna be interesting with Pumphrey because this running back class is so top heavy, but he is unique in what he offers, being a 5'8", 180-pound, Darren Sproles type back, and he's alleged. We don't promote falsities on here, so we'll say he's an alleged running in the low 4.3s of a 40.
Whoa. This is similar to Tyler Irvin, came out last year from San Jose State, who ran, I think, a 4.41 at the combine.
Exactly. So, he's going to be an interesting one to watch because those guys usually end up drafted late because, as Justin said, they have something that you can't teach, and, you can't teach speed. So you want to see, what his next step is. And then on the defensive side of the ball.
Before we move on, though, I really am a fan of this kid. I've watched him a lot. I actually thought – I looked at Pumphrey last year as a player who I thought might declare because he's that good of a player. And he has been a starter really, or at least a heavy contributor from day one for San Diego State. Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year last year. And he holds the school record for rushing yards in a season. And this is a school where Marshall Faulk went. And Pumphrey needs just 318 yards to break Faulk's career rushing record. And the other thing is Pumphrey has 73 catches in his career. I think this is I liked that you mentioned Sproles. Every small running back gets compared to Sproles. Every white receiver gets compared to Wes Welker. We joke about stuff like that, but I think Pumphrey is a player definitely draftable. If you look at Tyler Irvin in a lesser running back class, he was, I think, the fourth running back actually drafted, or fourth or fifth running back drafted in this past draft. Pumphrey is going to kind of get lost in the shuffle if all these underclassmen that we think actually do come out. So, but this is a guy I do have a lot of notes on, and I'm a fan.
And then on the defensive side of the ball, a guy that actually declared until he undeclared, DeMonte Casey from San Diego State. There's already conflicting reports and things of that nature of his size. I've seen 5'11", I've seen 5'10", so he's probably going to measure in at 5'9.5" at the Senior Bowl because that's just the way these guys end up going. But he is a pretty talented player, wouldn't you say?
He's a ball hawk. He had 8 picks last year. He has 21 pass breakups. KZ is a player, I think I first saw him as a true freshman, I believe, when it was either a true freshman or redshirt freshman. They were playing against Ohio State, and he made some plays in that game. He was a standout for them even back then. So he's another player like Pumphrey who has been around throughout his whole career making plays for San Diego State, and he was the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year last season. And like Seth said, he did declare, but he pulled back that declaration before he hired an agent. So this is a total ball hawk, a very good punt returner as well. Another player that I was looking at in preparation for him to declare last year. So another guy that I'm a fan of. And there have been players over the past couple of years. I'm not generally an advocate of drafting these tiny cornerbacks early, and I'm not saying that KZ is a first or second day pick, but this is a player who I like along the lines of a Senquez Golson, from a couple of years ago from Ole Miss. So I think he is also going to run a fast 40 time, and he could be a riser during the season.
Exactly, and it's fun to watch these guys that kind of come out of nowhere and make a huge impact, like Kazi and Pumphrey might. Speaking of running backs, Elijah McGuire, where does he kind of fit in? We talked about the uniqueness of a Pumphrey. Where does a guy like Elijah McGuire end up in this kind of conglomerate or this amalgamation of running backs in 2017, especially when you look at the fact that he's probably, maybe going to test, the best out of these guys.
McGuire, 2 years ago, as a true sophomore, he I think burst onto the scene. There was a Thursday night or a Tuesday night game where Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns, our good friend Emery Hunt is a graduate and alum of the Raging Cajuns, and at that time, McGuire was splitting time with another running back. I think the guy's name was Alonzo Harris, and he was a big back. And McGuire was clearly the better player, even though I liked Harris for what he was as well. McGuire, first team All-Sun Belt as a freshman in 2013, and then he was the Offensive Player of the Year 2 years in a row. I think he was 2013 freshman of the year, Offensive Player of the Year, and Conference Player of the Year in 2014. So I think going into last season, I expected McGuire to declare after the year, much like I had expected Kenneth Dixon to declare a couple of years ago out of Louisiana Tech. And McGuire had kind of a down year. He only averaged 5 yards a carry. Teams were really honed in on him. Their starting quarterback had graduated, so they were breaking in a new quarterback, and everybody was zoned in on McGuire. But he's also a fantastic receiver. And there's a vine going around on Twitter of him making a high point catch down the sideline, I think on a wheel route. And he looks like a receiver the way he handles that ball. He has 101 career receptions. I still think Elijah McGuire is a very good back. I think he's going to be a trendy player for people to fit into their maybe top 5 running backs. It depends on which of these underclassmen declare. He's not a huge guy. He's built like Dixon was. But I think he's going to test better than what Kenneth Dixon did, which wasn't bad at all. Kenneth Dixon went in the 4th round. I think McGuire probably ticketed for about the same area because of the depth of this class. But he's got a sneaky chance to, if he can get back to his form from a couple of years ago where he was averaging over 7 yards a carry, then you've got a potential sleeper there.
Well, and he's supposed to run in the 4.4s. Like, they say his low 40 end on drafts or NFL Draft Scout is 4.4 flat. So
if he does that, yeah, he's about 200. He gained some weight last year and was,
which could have been part of the issue.
Yeah, it did look like it slowed him down. I think he was playing at 215, and I think they're now listing him at 208. So I don't know much. I'm a tall guy. Seth and I are tall guys. We're big guys. To us, I don't know much. Like 5 pounds really is noticeable, but I guess for these finely tuned athletes, it can make a huge difference.
Exactly. From there, we wanted to just mention a dismissal out of Notre Dame, Max Redfield. How does this affect him in the draft world?
Yeah, good question. I'd like to know that myself. I mean, Redfield, just this weekend, Max Redfield was arrested along with a bunch of other, I think 4 other sophomores and freshmen were with him. And in the car, they found marijuana. And maybe that you don't think that's too big of a deal. I really don't. But there was also a gun. And the fact that Redfield was a senior and these other kids were sophomores and freshmen, I kind of thought Redfield was going to be the scapegoat, especially because he was suspended for the bowl game last year for some kind of violation of team rules. So here you have Max Redfield Sr., should be the guy setting the example, setting the tone in theory for these younger guys, and instead they're going around doing something they shouldn't have been doing, and they got caught for it. And Brian Kelly, as I expected, dismissed Redfield from the team. He's a former 5-star recruit. This dismissal comes at a very inopportune time as the season is about to start. I don't know if Redfield is going to go the route of going down to FCS level where he'd be able to play immediately, or is he going to sit out and then try and enroll in an FBS school next year, because he does have his full eligibility remaining. He has a redshirt year. Or does he sit out and try and get into the draft? We saw who am I thinking of? The receiver who was kicked out of Tennessee, was it Derrick Rogers? I don't know that he may have played. He may have transferred down. Do you remember?
No, I'm looking right now. Direct.
Yeah, but with Redfield, I think that the thing that was Kelly's last straw was, you've got the suspension going into that bowl game, and here's this guy who has to have already been on thin ice, and then he's supposed to be the leader, a senior leader, a starter, and he's got these other younger kids that he could be influencing in a positive way. Seth and I, we're not going to bash on college kids for making college kid mistakes, but these guys, unfortunately for them, they weren't in Louisiana where the charges were going to get tossed out, and they don't have Nick Saban to forgive them for their indiscretion of drugs and guns in cars.
Right, and people complain a lot about why that nothing happens to college kids, or that they're giving up this and that, but then Notre Dame gets a hard time for, like, when they actually bring a hammer down on players. It's such a weird, I don't know, it's just so weird to me. Like, you can't please everybody, obviously.
Remember last year when JT Barrett gets a DUI? I think it was Halloween weekend, and he blew a .08 or 09, something like that. But the thing was, Barrett was 20 years old. He wasn't supposed to be drinking at all. Which I'm sure all college kids under 21 wait until they turn 21, but Barrett didn't, and he got caught. And there were people that were saying that Urban Meyer should kick him off the team or suspend him for the rest of the season or things like that, and were angry that he only got one game. And then, as you said there, sometimes when guys don't get suspensions, it's a very interesting dynamic in the media, and especially on social media, how people respond to these types of suspensions. Sometimes people definitely think the NFL's substance abuse policy is way overboard, and then they think that college kids should be disciplined more sometimes, and then they bash their coaches for being soft because they're trying to win games. It's very interesting.
Anything else on these other conference guys or the independents?
No, and for those of you, again, that are interested in group of 5 players or independents that we did not cover tonight, again, just tweet a screenshot that tells us that you are subscribing. Tweet it to me, send me your email address, and I will email you a prospect preview that's going to cover all the players that we didn't talk about, including BYU quarterback Taysom Hill, who I think 2 days ago just celebrated his 26th birthday. So happy birthday to the grandfather of college football quarterbacks, Taysom Hill.
Exactly. We have college football tomorrow. Is there really that much to watch outside of this Davis Webb character that's transferring from Texas Tech and is taking the reins from Jared Goff?
In my opinion, or as far as I know, I'm going to say no, but check our buddy Dane Brugler's timeline, because somebody asked Dane Brugler the same question, and he gave a couple more names than we're going to give you here. I don't have anybody from Hawaii on my watch list. And if somebody emerges, somebody send me an email, let me know who that is. Maybe I'll find out tomorrow when I'll be watching it. But Davis Webb is the big name. He's taking over for Jared Goff. We know he's a graduate transfer from Texas Tech. I wrote about him and a few other graduate transfers at Revenge of the Birds a few weeks ago, so check that out. But Webb has 14 career starts. He's 6'5", 224, and people tell me, I don't remember because I haven't seen him in a couple years, but people tell me he has a cannon. So I am very interested in this Davis Webb, and I'm just looking forward to having a game. This is like our appetizer college football game. Last year, our appetizer was North Dakota State against Montana.
And we got to see future Hall of Fame quarterback Carson Wentz.
Yes, so it was that game pitted Carson Wentz against Brady Gustafson, who is still in school and probably somebody's sleeper this year. And Gustafson, as we mentioned on this show at that time, he outplayed Wentz that day in an upset win over North Dakota State. But then they go on to win their 25th FCS title in a row or something like that. And then Wentz, of course, goes on to become the number 2 overall pick, granting Cleveland next year's number 1 overall pick when the Philadelphia Eagles completely flame out.
Well, and that's the Eagles' fault because they're not going to play Carson at all. If you want to win, put the future out there, and you'll win 5 or 6 games and stay out of the first pick. But go with the Sam Bradford, Chase Daniel rotation. You get what you pay for.
Philadelphia is clearly sandwiching Chase Daniel between top 2 draft picks at quarterback. So and paying him $7 million a year for the honor. So Chase Daniel,
you know what? If you can get it.
Yeah, one of the most successful players in the NFL for my money.
And
has he even ever played? I don't know. This guy's he's just raking in money. He's got a number 1 overall and a number 2 overall on either side of him. And his only job is to just play. They have glass around Chase Daniel in case of an emergency.
Exactly. That's it for the normal segments, but we haven't had a long hot take segment in a while. So let's get it started. It's been a while. We've had some terrible takes from you people out there, and we thank you for those takes.
Please keep them coming.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to get upset with you for your terrible takes, honestly.
Seth, I have complete faith in Twitter to continue to provide terrible takes for as long as Twitter exists. And as I understand, their stock's doing quite well because of Periscope. So Twitter will continue on, and as will the hot takes and the hot take segments.
So I'll open it up tonight with an interesting one that came in a late riser, if you will. I gotta find it now. Goodness. So our buddy Joe Goodberry is a writer sometimes for the Draft and the Cincinnati Bengals. Does a lot of work at Cincy Jungle when he is doing work, and he does a lot of work on Twitter. He had an interesting take today. He said, and I quote, about La'el Collins, he's playing left guard right now, right?
Right.
The left guard for the Dallas Cowboys. Veteran scout showed a play that said La'el Collins on this line is simply unfair. And Joe quote tweeted it with best player in the 2015 draft, didn't get drafted. That's an interesting take on a guy that's playing guard.
Wait, did he say best player in the draft?
Yeah, best player in the draft that produced 2 pretty okay quarterbacks, I think. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe they're not good. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, this wasn't really a shocker to us, right? Because we had Joe on the show leading into that draft, and he told us that La'el Collins was his number 1 overall player. And I disagreed with him on that show, and I still disagree. Collins, we said it on the show. We said Collins was a guard, and people said, no, he's a left tackle. He's got the feet. He doesn't have the feet for guard. He doesn't play in a phone booth and all these things. And he's playing guard. We told you he'd play guard. He's playing guard. Listen to the Draft Breakdown podcast, and we'll give you tidbits like this. And maybe he has a future at tackle. I know that's a stacked line in a lot of people's opinion. Leo Collins gets grapevine treatment on Twitter whenever he's pushing around some third stringer at the end of these games. And I'm joking because Leo Collins is a good player, and I thought he was a day 2 player. Where I had him slotted was in the 3rd round area. I wouldn't have been upset with him in the 2nd round, but I was upset with people talking about him in the top 5. I don't believe that's the case, and if it was the case, I think he'd be playing left tackle somewhere, because certainly he had the off-field incident, which was really, really unfortunate because he didn't do anything. He was just associated with
somebody it was in his history. Like, he was on the unfortunate victim's life timeline, and therefore he had to answer questions, and it just happened to occur right before the draft. At
the worst possible time. I mean, this guy didn't do anything. He's been cleared of everything. He ends up going undrafted and landing in a great spot, and he's going to get great coaching, and he's probably going to be a very good starter, which is something that I don't think surprises anyone. I don't think it really surprises anybody, but he's playing guard where we talked about where we thought he would end up. And I think when a guy gets reps at a spot, he's going to tend to stay at that spot, and he's probably going to have a good career, make some money. I don't think he's going to prove to be the best player in that draft, especially with Jameis Winston hanging around.
Yeah, and some guy named Todd Gurley, even a David Johnson.
Yeah.
But I don't know a lot, so that's okay. Well, you had a couple?
Yeah, let's start with, because I've been watching Hard Knocks. I don't know if any of you guys are watching Hard Knocks, and if you're not, I don't blame you because it's been kind of lame. I really haven't seen anything exciting from Hard Knocks. Some people say that it's funny because they think Jared Goff seems dumb on that show. I don't think they've shown enough of him. We've seen we've seen Greg Williams scream and curse at players like a maniac, but we already knew that guy was a maniac because isn't he the guy who put bounties on everybody and then had a tearful apology? And we can see he's still the same lovely personality that he used to be. But in the midst of watching Hard Knocks, I've been looking for University of Southern Miss product, Michael Thomas. And because Michael Thomas, people told me that Michael Thomas from Southern Miss was better than Michael Thomas from Ohio State, who's having a fantastic camp for the New Orleans Saints. And looks like he's going to be a starter there. Looks like he's going to be targeted heavily. And even if he's not going to be, he's definitely in their future plans. And I can't say the same for Southern Miss Mike Thomas, who ends up going in the 6th round to the Los Angeles Rams. They have a ton of undrafted rookies as well.
And a team that's desperately in need of talent at the wide receiver position. Desperately.
Yeah, they need somebody to step up, and they have these undrafted free agents like Duke Williams, Nelson Spruce, and I think I'm forgetting another guy. And then, of course, they have Tavon Austin and Kenny Britt. They have this whole crowd of receivers, and Mike Thomas, I haven't seen him on the show. I have not seen him one time on the show. We saw a tweet from, I think, Turf Show Times was at the SBN site that covers the Los Angeles Rams, and they said of the 5 players who received the most snaps on offense, Michael Thomas is in that group, and he has 0 catches on 2 targets. This guy seems like he's ticketed for practice squad, not top 5 receiver in the draft. And in honor of this, I went back and I looked at some tweets that had Michael Thomas, our good friend Paolo Figueri. Paolo, if you're listening, he said, I think I may be the only person with Mike Thomas, USM, in their top 5 receivers. I have good news. You are not. You are not the only one, because JR at JR Reed Draft Scout said, my biggest draft board riser continues to be Southern Miss Mike Thomas. He flashes first-round talent at times, might end up in my top 5. And then our good friend, our buddy Tyler Dixon. Tyler, I know you're listening, and we don't discriminate. We'll read any tweets. He's at TD God GAWD. He said Mike Thomas, Southern Miss, is probably a top 5 wide receiver on my list. Wow. Hashtag wow. That was in January, though, so I forgive him if he changed his list, and forgive me if I missed it. But there's 3 examples that had Mike Thomas in their top 5 receivers. Some people talking first round. This is a player of the prototype that I talked about earlier, that there are like 30 of these guys that are 6'1", 6 foot 6'1", 190 to 200 pounds, and they don't test fantastically. You know, they don't have these spectacular test numbers, and they end up going late, and then they end up having to compete with a bunch of other guys just like them. And if they don't have a great camp, they fall through the cracks. It's not to say that this guy can't play. It's to say that he's probably not going to play for the Los Angeles Rams, and hopefully he catches on somewhere else. But he clearly wasn't a top 5 receiver in that class. I don't think that will happen down the road, that he becomes one.
No, I'm with you there. And anytime you stake your claim to a guy and then he either doesn't make it in the league or doesn't even get a chance in the CFL, like a Vernon Adams, I like to go back and laugh. And it's not a shot at people. Like Derek Clausen's a buddy of ours. He's a good guy. We just like to give him a hard time about it. So.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. Anybody who's listened, go back and listen to our shows. You can find dozens of guys to give us hard times about.
Right. I just said O.J. Howard's going to be a top 20 pick, so I am ready. So the next one, this was from, and I don't know if he listens to the show. I doubt it. But at Spraggy 2009, dropping a take on Joey Bosa. Wow, and he added him, so at least there's that. At JB Big Bear, there are kids all over the world who would never be able to play sport through illness or disability. Shame on you. Hashtag Bosa. So just remember.
He pulled the illness and disability card.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
so if you're not playing for an offer that you don't deem fair, you're just being selfish.
I think this is going to be a common take with Bosa. When I was younger, I probably would have thought this guy's being selfish, this guy's being a prima donna, and he needs to take his offer because he should have a privilege to play pro sports, because anybody would feel lucky. Of course, people will say, I would take $20,000 a year or $10 an hour or whatever to play football. But as I've gotten older, I've come to learn that these guys have a special – this is like the Taken line, right, with Liam Neeson. They have a special set of skills. And that skill set, you don't have it. That's why you would play it for $10 an hour, but you don't have the skill set. Nobody wants you. Nobody wants to even see you play. They don't want to see us play, They don't want to see me try and throw a ball with my old shoulder or run with my bad knee. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see Spraggy play. And to try and guilt the guy, I mean, Bosa, regardless of what you think about the contract situation, it seems like it's kind of confusing to me. Is he trying to lay some new ground that hasn't been laid before? It doesn't seem like that. And the Chargers have a history of first-round picks holding out, so they are not exactly to quote Kramer from Seinfeld, from an old Seinfeld. They're not washing their hands with ivory soap. So this seems bizarre to throw the total guilt trip. I mean, just to shame him by bringing up children with illnesses. That's awful, man. Spraggy, you should be ashamed of yourself for bringing that into the mix. You can say the guy's being greedy or whatever, but don't try and guilt trip people, and don't try and use kids in your argument for no reason.
Yeah, I have kids. They you know why they won't be able to play in the NFL? Because they are going to all be under 6 feet tall and not athletic. So damn you, genetics.
So they can kick.
Well, I don't know if they can. We'll have to find out. So My best athlete has like 2 iron lungs, so that'll be interesting for.
Seth, you got to teach them those. You got to teach all those boys of yours to throw left-handed because they can pitch to one batter at a time in the major leagues, and they can make millions of dollars.
Exactly. We're gonna have to start tying right hands down in the Cox household.
So we have. I've got a hot take here, and it's from, hey, Greg Gabriel, former personnel guy, longtime personnel guy, and if anybody's listened to the show, Greg Gabriel has blocked a lot of guys, and he's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way with his demeanor on Twitter. But I actually am a fan of Greg Gabriel, and I think he offers a lot of insight, and he knows about things that we don't know about. He's been places that we haven't been and that we never will be. So when he says some things, I think it is fair to take note. And to that point, Greg Gabriel was one of the people last year who said that Connor Cook not being named a team captain was going to end up being a big deal. And we laughed at Greg Gabriel, and we probably read that tweet on the air too, and people were retweeting his tweet and shaming him on Twitter, and that stuck the whole year, much to my annoyance. That stuck the whole year. I mean, he was right. People were digging into Connor Cook the entire year because he wasn't named team captain. So Greg Gabriel knows what he's talking about, but this is a hot take, man. This is a hot take, Seth. He says, Greg tweeted, was told by a top NFL personnel guy that UCLA quarterback Josh Rosen better drop entitlement attitude if he wants to be as good as he thinks he is. Josh Rosen is apparently the poster boy of millennials, entitlement. He's probably looking at his phone right now, checking his phone while an older person is trying to talk to him. Josh Rosen, we know he was out on the golf course with an F Trump hat. I think that's what it said, and he Instagrammed that. Yeah, this entitlement has to stop. This entitlement. So Josh Rosen, who's a true sophomore, he is 19 years old, and God forbid that a 19-year-old should act like a 19-year-old, but we've come to judge these kids from day one, maybe even before they get to college if they're big enough recruits. So Greg is telling us that NFL people are being rubbed the wrong way by Josh Rosen, and I think Jim Mora Jr. actually told Josh Rosen something similar a few weeks ago or a month ago, and Jim Mora Jr. was laughed out of the room by Twitter when he said that too. But I'm taking note of this because of the Connor Cook thing. I'm filing this away because I think there's legitimacy to it if Gabriel's saying it.
Yeah, it's always interesting because, everybody likes to make fun of Greg Gabriel, and he hasn't blocked me yet. Greg, don't block me if there's no reason to. But
Greg, if he's listening, which I'm sure he's not, but if he is, and I do follow Greg, please don't block me because I do enjoy your takes, and hopefully, I don't think he's writing for National Football Post anymore. But a lot of his scouting reports last year that he wrote during the season ended up being pretty spot on.
Exactly. So, any other hot takes you want to get on tonight before we head out of here?
There was one more. Our buddy Jim Coburn, who I admire greatly for his analytics work. He does a lot of really good metric stuff, in my opinion. He deals with production, he deals with athleticism, and he's a believer, like I am, that production and athleticism matter, and he has a different way of measuring things than I do. I think he kind of sticks to his script a little bit more than I do. But this was an interesting tweet by Jim last night. He said, 2017 NFL Draft top edge safeties. Number 1, Myles Garrett. I said edge safeties, if anybody didn't hear me. Number 1 was Myles Garrett. Number 2 was Marquise Haynes. Number 3 was Jabril Peppers, who I'm writing about, and that'll be at revengeofthebirds.com on, I think, tomorrow, right, Seth?
Yep.
And then Devontae Fields, and then Tony Connor. So if I read through that list again, Myles Garrett, Marquise Haynes, Jabril Peppers, Devontae Fields, and Tony Connor, you see there's something isn't quite adding up, right? There are some basically some defensive ends, some outside linebacker types, and then there are some defensive back types. So interesting term by Jim, edge safeties, and he did clarify, but I'll let you comment on this before I go into the clarification.
I just don't know what that is. Like, I was very confused for a second. Like, are we saying that Garrett is going to test similarly? Like, I get that you have to weigh in density. I do get that. But are we saying that range of direction and overall skill set is going to allow him to play like safety in the NFL? Is that what we're explain it to me so I can still be confused.
Okay, so Jim had an explanation. He followed this up with a tweet a little bit after going back and forth with some people. He said, for those that don't get edge safeties, a 6'5", 225 to 230-pound edge rusher is a far cry from a 6'5", 265-pound beasts of 15 years ago. So a 6'5", 225, 230, that actually, if we're talking about, he mentioned Devontae Fields, and if we're talking about Louisville guys, we could mention Josh Harvey Clemens, who's listed at 6'5", 220, 230 pounds, who is a safety, who probably has to play linebacker at pro level. But what he's saying here, and he goes on to say this in some other tweets, is that he's saying that Myles Garrett is actually going to weigh in closer to what Randy Gregory weighed in, which was in the 235-pound range, closer to than what he's listed as, which is 262 pounds. And I'm looking at a picture of Myles Garrett. I looked at it last night. I looked at a picture of him versus a picture of Randy Gregory, and to me, Garrett looks much more filled out. That's just me. That's my eyes. Of course, we're going to have to wait until weigh-ins, but that's what Jim meant. It was a little tongue-in-cheek because I don't think he's saying Myles Garrett's going to play safety, but what he's saying is those guys that he put on that list are light.
Yeah, I still don't understand it, but I respect Jim and his work and what he does. Like I said, there's a reason these are in hot takes because sometimes I just need like a guide to what some people are saying. Like somebody draw me a map or something so I can understand and get on board with what's being said and going on.
This hot take section, by the way, we didn't read I actually wanted to do this. I wanted to make sure that we didn't read anything from @GamScout because he sometimes he monopolizes this area of the show, and I wanted to give some other people some chances. So thanks to all the people who we read tweets from. Follow them all on Twitter if you so choose. And if you want to follow Jim, he's at Jimmetrics, which is JIMETRICS.
Yeah, and he's a good buddy of ours, and he's a great follow, and
he does really good
information
work.
There. Yeah. So, but yeah, I get confused by all these newfangled things. I have to have Justin walk me through a lot of these metrics numbers so I can understand what's going on. But I don't think Myles Garrett's going to weigh under 250. Do you? I mean, really?
No, I don't think so. I mean, when I see 262, I guess it's weird. We see height inflated. We almost assume that height's going to be inflated, and for whatever reason, I don't assume that weight's going to be inflated. Maybe I should. 30 pounds seems like a ton of inflation.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So
if somebody said I weigh 260 pounds, I would be mad. I would be mad that they thought that.
Exactly. Well, that's it from us tonight. We appreciate everybody listening. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes or SoundCloud and send that screenshot in or an email in to Justin to let him know so he can get you this fantastic preview for the 2016 college football season and the 2017 NFL draft season. So you're just ready to start learning about these players from the jump, and you're not having to play catch up as the season goes along. You're not going to find a more comprehensive list of players anywhere else. I can promise you that. So
except on NFLDraftScout.com, but
yeah, but they got to search through a lot of stuff there.
I think they also have more than one person working on it. I could be wrong.
Right. So, but thanks as always for listening. We'll be back next week to wrap up a college football game and take a look at some of the games starting next weekend. Thanks for listening, guys, and have a good night.
Good night.